The evening she departed is indelibly etched into my consciousness, an emotional laceration that refuses to heal. It was pouring rain, a predictable scenario. I acknowledge, and she exhibited no decorum by waiting for the children to be asleep. She stood in the sitting room, an expensive valise clutched in her hand, her gaze remote and disengaged. I vividly recall our youngest, Alfie, clutching desperately to her knee, sobbing, "Mummy, where are you going?" Her only response was to look squarely at me and state, "I am unable to sustain this existence any longer. I require the pursuit of my authenticity," her so-called authenticity. It transpired was a gentleman named Gareth, whom she had met at her Pilates studio. She left that evening without a backward glance. There were no farewells, no expressions of contrition, just stark silence followed by the audible click of our front door securing behind her. I stood there, utterly stupefied, holding the fragmented remains of what was once our family unit. I had to reconstitute my composure swiftly. 3 offspring, no prior notification. No maternal figure, merely myself, confronting the unyielding reality that the woman I adored had opted for another. The inaugural year was an absolute torment. Charlotte, our eldest, ceased conversing for several months. Barnaby, barely 10 at the time, became involved in altercations at his primary academy. Alfie wept himself to sleep on occasions too numerous to enumerate. And my state? I undertook 2 occupations. Prepared packed luncheons, styled their hair, assisted with scholastic assignments, wept clandestinely in the shower, and compelled a smile every single dreadful day. Individuals engaged in covert gossip. Some attributed the fault to me, others offered pity. Yet, no one truly comprehended. No one witnessed the sheer exertion required to maintain the solidity of our domicile. Whilst the woman who was meant to be my coadjutor was indulging in a new life with another fellow. Furthermore, she never telephoned, not even once. No felicitation cards for birthdays, no acknowledgments of era, not even a remittance for subsidizing the children. It was as if she had evaporated, as if we were merely a section of her narrative she had elected to elide. But I refused to permit her absence to delineate our existence. I nurtured my children with affection, rigorous standards, and candor. I instructed them not to harbor resentment towards her, but neither did I misrepresent the truth. They matured knowing their progenitor had prioritized her own desires. The unexpected reappearance revised. Despite the shadow she cast, they nonetheless flourished into remarkable individuals. Charlotte pursued a vocation as a clinical nurse. Barnaby established his own automotive repair premises. Alfie, the gentle, vulnerable soul, enlisted in the armed forces. My pride was immeasurable. I had achieved this. We had accomplished this without her intervention. Therefore, when I unlatched the door 2 decades and a year subsequently and beheld her standing upon the threshold, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes possessing a weary demeanor, a valise clutched in her hand. Precisely as before, my initial reflex was not one of ire, it was perplexing disarray. And then, with glacial detachments, I posed the query, why this juncture? She offered no immediate rejoinder. She merely regarded me as if I were the one who had dematerialized. I committed a grievous error, she finally muttered. Her voice fractured with a species of anguish I had implored 4 years ago, back when I sought closure. When I craved explanations, when I wept solitarily at 2 a.m, contemplating my own transgressions. But now a chilling stillness was my sole sentiment. The children were fully adult. My existence was steadfast, utterly tranquil, and yet here she was, attempting to dislodge the debris of the past as if the intervening 2 decades had not. I've been an era of absolute taciturnity. Gareth passed away 3 months prior, she continued, her hands visibly quivering. I have been entirely isolated since. I entertained the notion that perhaps we could engage in dialogue. She gazed beyond me, appearing to anticipate a cordial reception back into the manor, our collective dwelling, as if no interim had elapsed. I remained immobile. I did not amplify the aperture of the door. I simply observed her, the furrows etched onto her countenance, the sacs beneath her eyes, and reflected upon every solitary instance she had forfeited, every minor injury, every annual commemoration, every academic ceremonial. Charlotte was the first to be apprised of her re-emergence. She was incensed, not sorrowful, not inquisitive, merely furious. She is not entitled to return after 21 years and fame that she still holds relevance, she declared, via the telephonic connection. Barnaby offered scant commentary, emitting a low sound in his throat and ejaculating, "She possesses audacity. I shall grant her that, Alfie." Perpetually, the pacifist merely inquired, "Are you well, father?" None of them expressed a desire to encounter her. None of them inquired regarding her whereabouts or her welfare. They had constructed their lives entirely without her input. We all had engineered our existence in her absence. And now she was present, behaving as though Chronos time was somehow indebted to her for a second opportunity. "I desire to re-establish acquaintance with them," she declared, standing on my front lawn as if she had not detonated a catastrophic explosive within our lives 2 decades previously. I wished to make amends. I emitted a short, sharp bark of derision, not because the situation was remotely humorous, but because her audacity was utterly astounding. "You are not entitled to harbor desires now," I informed her. "You relinquished that prerogative nonetheless. A part of my constitution could not simply force the portal shut. I was not that sort of gentleman." I extended an invitation for her to be seated upon the veranda. I prepared her a beverage tea. I gave her an ear. She recounted how her life with Gareth had disintegrated, how the liberation she had once coveted had ultimately become a stricture, how he had never harbored a desire for offspring, how she longed for her own children, how remorse had ferociously clouded her every nocturnal period. Yet none of this discourse served to alter the established facts. I fixed my gaze upon her and asserted, "They are no longer subordinate to your authority," and I meant that declaration. She had willfully forsaken them, and now she sought to re-enter their lives merely because her substitute existence had not transpired precisely as intended. The succeeding days were peculiar. They possessed a hush, yet not the salubrious kind. It was the type of disquiet that follows a tempest, where everything appears superficially intact, but one knows intrinsically that a fundamental shift has occurred beneath the exterior. Charlotte transmitted a subsequent digital communication. "She had better not approach myself or my children," the message read. Barnaby did not even bother to maintain a veneer of civility. "Inform her that if she seeks a reunion, she ought to commence digging through the cinders of what she emulated." And Alfie, the tender-hearted Alfie, the solitary one who still telephoned me meticulously every Sunday, gently stated, "You executed every responsibility, father. You served as both progenitors. She is undeserving of a position in our continuing narrative." And he was unquestionably correct. I contemplated every scholastic assembly I had attended alone. Every evening I had sat beside Charlotte's cot whilst she wept over a mother she could scarcely recollect. The manner in which Barnaby had ceased verbal communication entirely for nearly a year following her abandonment, and how I used to lie awake, contemplating if one day she would feel penitence. No, I knew she did, but regret is not a master key. It does not unbolt portals. It merely serves as a brutal reminder of all the ones you violently secured. One afternoon, she deposited a written communiqué upon the veranda. No percussion on the door, no exchange of words, merely an envelope tucked beneath the coir mat, akin to some delicate overture. Inside the missive was a photographic print. It depicted us a span of years earlier, preceding the treachery before the onset of the agony. Upon the reverse side, she had inscribed a brief declaration, "My apologies for all transgressions. I comprehend that I am unworthy of absolution. I merely wish to convey my final farewell appropriately this time." That particular evening, I scrutinized that photograph for an extended duration. not due to any lingering nostalgia for her presence, but because of the stark reality that I experienced none. That iteration of her, the woman to whom I was united in wedlock, had perished the very day she elected another individual over the domestic structure we had painstakingly erected. The woman who stood upon my threshold weeks ago was merely an unknown entity, and I was indebted to that stranger for nothing. Neither my valuable hours, nor my offspring, nor my affections. A month subsequently, Alfie and I were outside broiling steaks in the rear garden. The grandchildren were sprinting through the oscillating sprinkler. Peals of mirth resonated through the ambient atmosphere. Charlotte and her husband were due to arrive shortly. Barnaby had transmitted a brief text earlier: "Do not commence the consumption of ale without my presence." And in that precise juncture, encompassed by the family I had nurtured, the family she had abandoned, I experienced a profound stillness. Not the sort that follows the cessation of a meteorological upheaval, but the kind that emanates from the certainty of survival. I had shouldered the burden of her perfidiousness for numerous years, and now, finally, I had deposited it. She may have retreated all those years ago, but I had advanced, and I never cast a look behind. Please subscribe my channel if you enjoy the story, and for more stories. Thank you.